You're kneeling on the concrete floor beside your motorcycle. There's a socket wrench near your knee, a flashlight balanced against the rear tire, and a dark streak of grease across your fingers. For the last 20 minutes, you've been trying to locate a faint metallic sound that only appears at a certain engine speed. Someone walks through the garage, looks at the scattered tools, and asks the obvious question: why don't you just take it to a mechanic? You could. Maybe that would be faster. Maybe the mechanic has better equipment, more experience, and a lift that doesn't require you to crawl around on the floor. But your answer is simple: I just want to know what's going on. That sentence reveals more than it seems, because for some people, fixing the problem isn't enough. They want to know which part caused it, why it happened, what warning signs appeared beforehand, and whether they could recognize those signs again. From the outside, this is usually explained as saving money, enjoying machines, or not trusting repair shops. And sometimes that's exactly what it is. But for many people who maintain their own motorcycles, something deeper may also be happening. The process can reveal 6 hidden psychological traits connected to trust, responsibility, frustration, attention, competence, and autonomy. None of these traits are automatically positive. The same person can work on a motorcycle because they feel curious and capable, or because depending on someone else makes them anxious. The behavior looks identical. The psychology behind it may not be. The first hidden trait is the need to understand before trusting. When most people pick up a motorcycle from a repair shop, they mainly want to know one thing: is it fixed? But another kind of person asks different questions. What failed? What did you replace? Can I see the old part? What caused the wear? What should I listen for if it starts happening again? They're not necessarily trying to challenge the mechanic. They may not believe they know more than the professional. They simply feel more comfortable when they can see the chain between cause and effect. Something happened. A part responded, a symptom appeared, a decision was made. Once they understand that sequence, the situation feels more predictable, and predictability often creates a sense of safety. Imagine being told that a strange vibration has been taken care of. For many people, that's enough. The problem has been handed to someone qualified, and the result is what matters. But for someone who needs to understand before trusting, the explanation feels incomplete. Taken care of how? Was something loose? Was something worn down? Was the vibration harmless, or was it the early sign of a larger problem? The discomfort doesn't always come from suspicion. Sometimes it comes from the gap between depending on something and not knowing how it works. A motorcycle is not just an object sitting in the garage. It carries you at highway speeds. It responds to your body, your judgment, and the condition of dozens of components you cannot fully observe while riding. For some people, trust in that machine becomes easier when trust is supported by knowledge. They don't only want reassurance, they want a mental map. This may reflect a strong internal sense of control, the tendency to feel safer when you can participate in what affects you instead of remaining completely passive. But there is an important difference between wanting to understand and being unable to trust without supervision. Curiosity says, "Teach me what happened." Anxiety says, "Unless I personally verify everything, I can't relax." Both may lead someone to ask the same questions. Only one leaves room for another person's expertise. And when understanding becomes a requirement for trust, taking personal responsibility often feels like the natural next step. That leads to the second hidden trait. They assume responsibility for the outcome. Before a long ride, this person doesn't simply look at the motorcycle and hope everything is fine. They check tire pressure. They look at the chain. They inspect fluid levels, controls, and fasteners. Not necessarily because they believe disaster is waiting around the corner, but because they don't want to discover later that they ignored something they could have noticed earlier. There is a particular kind of comfort in knowing that you looked. You made the decision. You checked the condition. If everything works, you know what you did. If something goes wrong, you can return to your own process and ask what you missed. That direct relationship between action and result builds personal agency. You do something. You observe what changes, you adjust, you learn. Over time, the motorcycle becomes a place where consequences feel visible. Many parts of life are not like that. You can work hard and still be overlooked. You can communicate carefully and still be misunderstood. You can make responsible choices and still face outcomes you could not control. Mechanical work can feel different. A bolt has a specification, a component has a condition, a cable has tension, an adjustment produces a response. Reality may still surprise you, but it gives feedback. For someone who has spent years feeling that important outcomes depend on unpredictable people, unclear rules, or circumstances beyond their control, that feedback can be deeply satisfying. Here, attention matters. Preparation matters. Your decisions have weight, but responsibility can slowly become excessive. You may begin to believe that delegating is the same as being careless. You may feel that any preventable problem proves you were not attentive enough. A normal mechanical failure becomes a personal failure. You don't simply think, a part wore out. You think, I should have caught it sooner. Responsibility, when healthy, gives you a role in your own safety. When it becomes rigid, it creates the illusion that you should be able to prevent every bad outcome through enough vigilance. That is an exhausting promise to make to yourself. And once you take responsibility for the result, you must also face a difficult reality. Effort does not always produce an immediate solution. That brings us to the third hidden trait. They can tolerate frustration for longer than most people realize. A repair that looks simple in a video can become completely different in your garage. A bolt refuses to move. A replacement part doesn't fit. The first diagnosis turns out to be wrong. You remove 3 components to reach one fastener, only to discover that the tool you need is the one tool you don't own. This is where mechanical work stops being an image of calm competence and becomes something more honest. Confusion, repetition, wrong turns, waiting. You may spend an hour trying to solve a problem that still looks exactly the same when you finish. Yet, some people remain there. They stop before using uncontrolled force. They change the angle. They clean the area. They check the manual again. They step away, come back, and reconsider what they assumed. That ability is not simply patience. It is the capacity to remain in contact with a problem without interpreting the problem as proof of personal inadequacy. When the bolt does not move, the thought is not automatically, I'm terrible at this. It becomes, something is preventing movement. What haven't I understood yet? That shift matters. It separates frustration from identity. You can be stuck without becoming a failure. You can be confused without being incapable. You can discover that your first idea was wrong without deciding that you should never have tried. Many people abandon difficult tasks not because they lack intelligence, but because uncertainty quickly becomes emotionally uncomfortable. They want confirmation that they are moving in the right direction. When that confirmation disappears, the task begins to feel threatening. Mechanical work rarely offers constant reassurance. Sometimes you have to tolerate not knowing. You have to postpone the satisfaction of completion. You have to stay with the problem long enough for new information to appear. This can strengthen emotional regulation. The person learns that frustration rises, reaches a peak, and can be managed without immediately escaping or exploding. But here too, the trait has a shadow. Persistence can become stubbornness. You may continue long after fatigue has reduced your judgment. You may refuse to call someone with more experience because asking for help feels like admitting defeat. At that point, you are no longer staying with the problem because staying is useful. You are staying because leaving threatens the image you have of yourself. The question is not only whether you can persist, it is whether you can recognize when persistence has stopped serving the task. Still, remaining with a problem has one powerful effect. You begin to notice details that are invisible to people who leave too quickly. That reveals the fourth hidden trait. They detect small changes before others do. When you spend enough time with the same motorcycle, you build an internal reference for what normal feels like. You know the usual sound of the engine on a cold morning. You know how the clutch engages. You know the pressure of the brake lever and the vibration that appears at a certain speed. You may not consciously record these details. Your brain simply gathers them through repetition. Then, one day, something shifts. The clutch engages a little later than usual. The engine sounds slightly rough at a specific RPM. A vibration appears through the handlebars, but only under certain conditions. Someone else rides the motorcycle and notices nothing. You notice immediately. This is not magic or instinct in the mysterious sense. Familiarity creates a baseline. When the pattern changes, the difference stands out. The same process happens in other areas of life. A parent recognizes a change in a child's voice before the child admits something is wrong. A musician hears that an instrument is slightly out of tune. A person who knows a room intimately notices when an object has been moved a few inches. Attention becomes sharper when it is supported by repeated contact. For the person who maintains their own motorcycle, noticing small changes can create a quiet sense of connection. You are not simply operating the machine, you are listening to it. You know how it normally responds, so you can recognize when it is asking for attention. That sensitivity can represent care, experience, and presence. But it can also become hypervigilance. Once you train yourself to detect changes, every unfamiliar sound may begin to feel significant. A harmless vibration becomes evidence that something serious is developing. A temporary noise occupies your attention for the entire ride. Instead of enjoying the road, you are mentally scanning for failure. The motorcycle is functioning, but your nervous system is conducting a non-stop inspection. This is where attentiveness and anxiety begin to resemble each other. Both notice details. The difference is what happens next. Attentiveness gathers information. Anxiety immediately predicts danger. Attentiveness says, "That's different. I should observe it." Anxiety says, "That's different. Something is wrong." The sound may be the same. The internal experience is not. Still, each time a person notices a real issue and successfully responds to it, something important grows inside them. A belief begins to take shape. I can handle this. That leads to the fifth hidden trait. They build confidence through competence. Some people feel confident after receiving encouragement. Others need evidence. They may appreciate being told that they are capable, but words do not fully settle inside them until experience confirms those words. For this person, confidence grows through completed tasks. First, they learn basic checks. Then they change the oil. Later, they replace brake pads, adjust components, trace an electrical issue, or identify a problem that once would have left them completely lost. Each new skill changes the way they see the motorcycle, but more importantly, it changes the way they see themselves. The machine becomes less mysterious. A problem that once created helplessness now creates questions. What changed? What system is involved? What can I rule out? What information do I need? That transition from panic to investigation is one of the clearest signs of growing self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is simply the belief that you can take meaningful action when facing a challenge. It is not the belief that you already know everything. It is the belief that you can observe, learn, attempt, adjust, and make progress. This kind of confidence is usually quieter than performance. The person does not need to claim expertise. They remember the afternoon when nothing made sense, the mistake they corrected, the part they reinstalled, and the moment the engine finally responded differently. Their confidence has a history. It was built through contact with reality. That can be deeply stabilizing, especially for someone who has often felt helpless in other parts of life. When emotions, relationships, or institutions seem unpredictable, practical competence offers a clear message. There are things you can learn. There are situations in which your actions matter. There are problems that become smaller when you move toward them instead of away. But competence can also become a condition for self-worth. You may start believing that your value comes from never being the person who needs help. Not knowing something feels embarrassing. Paying a professional feels like failure. Making a mistake feels more threatening because your identity is now attached to being capable. You no longer say, "I don't know how to fix this." You hear yourself saying, "I should know how to fix this." That single word, should, can turn curiosity into pressure. Real competence includes awareness of your limits. It includes recognizing when a job requires training, specialized tools, or a level of precision you do not have. A mature sense of ability does not disappear when another person knows more. In fact, the more secure you become, the easier it should be to learn from someone else without feeling diminished. Because confidence is not proven by doing everything alone. It is revealed by making good decisions, including the decision to ask for help. And this brings all the previous traits together in the sixth hidden trait. They seek autonomy, but not always for the same reason. Maintaining your own motorcycle can symbolize something larger than mechanical independence. It can be a way of saying, I want to know that I can care for the thing that carries me forward. You cannot control every breakdown. You cannot prevent every unexpected event. But you can build enough knowledge to respond. If the motorcycle develops a problem far from home, you may not be able to complete a permanent repair on the side of the road. But perhaps you can identify likely causes. You can avoid making the situation worse. You can explain the symptoms clearly when asking for assistance. You are still dependent on other people at times. You are simply not completely powerless. That distinction is important. Healthy autonomy does not mean never needing anyone. It means having enough internal resources to participate in what happens to you. You can observe, you can decide, you can respond, you can choose whom to trust and when. For some people, this autonomy grows from curiosity and enjoyment. They love learning how systems work. They find satisfaction in using their hands and watching separate pieces become functional again. Their independence feels expansive. It gives them more options. For others, autonomy may have a more defensive origin, perhaps depending on people once meant waiting indefinitely. Perhaps promises were unreliable. Perhaps asking for help led to disappointment, criticism, or a feeling of being controlled. So they learned a rule. The safest way to avoid being let down is to become the person who does not need anything. That rule can create impressive skill. It can also create isolation. Two people may perform the same repair with the same concentration and the same technical ability. One is thinking, I love knowing how to do this. The other is feeling, I cannot allow myself to depend on anyone. From the outside, both look independent. Inside, one is experiencing freedom. The other is managing fear. This is the central question beneath the entire behavior. Do you maintain your own motorcycle because you trust your ability? Or because you struggle to trust that someone else will care for it with the same attention? There may not be one clean answer. Most of us are motivated by more than one thing. Your curiosity may be real, and so may your anxiety. Your competence may bring genuine pleasure, while also protecting you from the vulnerability of relying on others. You can enjoy independence and still use it as armor. The goal is not to judge the behavior. It is to notice what happens when you cannot perform it. Can you let a skilled mechanic take over without feeling restless or ashamed? Can you ask questions without needing to control every step? Can you admit that a problem exceeds your current knowledge without experiencing it as a threat to your identity? Do you work on the motorcycle because the process gives you energy, or because delegating fills you with tension? That is often where the difference becomes visible. A preference gives you choices. A defense removes them. When autonomy is healthy, you can do the work yourself or consciously decide not to. When autonomy becomes defensive, doing it yourself no longer feels like a choice. It feels like the only way to remain safe. A small experiment may reveal more than a long explanation. The next time you face a task you could reasonably delegate, observe your first emotional reaction. Not your argument. Not the practical reasons. The reaction underneath them. Is it interest, pride, excitement, or is it tension, suspicion, guilt, or the fear that relying on someone will leave you exposed? You do not have to stop doing the work. You only have to notice what the work is doing for you. Because sometimes the person kneeling beside the motorcycle is not merely adjusting a chain or investigating a sound. They are reducing uncertainty. They are turning attention into safety. They are proving that frustration can be endured. They are collecting evidence that they are capable. They are protecting themselves from the feeling of being helpless when something important stops working. That is why the question, "Why don't you just take it to a mechanic?" can miss the point. The task may never have been only about repairing the machine. It may also be about maintaining a relationship with control, trust, and independence. And there is nothing inherently wrong with that. Knowing how to care for what carries you is valuable. Understanding a system can make you safer. Building real competence can transform fear into informed action. But the deepest form of autonomy is not proving that you can do everything alone. It is knowing that your capability remains intact even when you choose to trust someone else. So the next time you see a person in a garage, hands covered in grease, listening closely to a sound almost no one else can hear, remember this. They may not simply be fixing a motorcycle. They may be reminding themselves that when something breaks, they will not be completely powerless. And perhaps true independence begins when you realize that knowing how to take care of something and allowing someone trustworthy to help you are not opposite abilities. They are two parts of the same strength. If you recognized yourself in this, share which side of independence you relate to most, and subscribe for more explorations of the hidden psychology behind everyday behavior.